Greg Staley here from Diverge Media. Excited to bring on our guest, Thomas Gregory, who ran for the New Blue Party of Ontario. Thomas is a history major, or is studying to be a history major, and also political science. And so we got a big show to talk about. Obviously, tariffs were imposed on Canada today. Canada imposed retaliatory tariffs. We're going to talk about that and the steady decline of Canada. So let's welcome Thomas Gregory.
Hey Greg, how you doing?
Good. Yeah, you got a great last name, by the way.
I do? People always tell me I got 2 first names, or really
Yeah.
3, because my middle name is Russell.
Well, yeah, it's kind of true. I used to get the only time I ever heard Gregory is when it was followed by my middle and last name, and I was about to get my rear end handed to me by my mom. So, generally speaking, I almost freeze when I hear Gregory, unrelated to your last name. But like every time I hear it, I'm just like flashbacks. Anyways, so excited to have you on today. We talked a little bit in Mississauga when I was in Ontario,
Mhm.
and yeah, it was obviously a short conversation. I think I interviewed 8 candidates that night, something like that.
I believe it was 8, yeah.
Yes.
Or like 5-minute apiece kinda thing, yeah.
Yeah, it was basically an introduction to kinda like who you are, where you're running, and like why were you running New Blue. So, I tell the audience a little bit about yourself. You're 20 years old. You're in university for history major, political science major, which is
Mhm.
ridiculous at 20 years old to be a double major or going for a double major, and you just ran in the last election just a
Mhm.
few short days ago. It feels like.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't very long ago at all, obviously. Yeah, I mean, I attend, Toronto Metropolitan University. What a mouthful. um, Formerly known as Ryerson, and I double major in history and political science. And I just wanted to vote for the New Blue Party initially. I kind of would have figured they would have had somebody, but obviously with the nature of how snap elections are and the fact that it's a small party, it didn't overly surprise me that there wasn't a candidate in my riding because yeah, it's a very liberal riding, so I'm glad that I got to be the person to step up. I feel proud about it. Instead of giving them 1 vote, I gave them hundreds of votes, right? So that's kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah,
And yeah.
it's tough to be in those. You're in Toronto, right? Or
I
Mississauga. Do they
in
get offended?
beaches, yeah,
Yeah.
in beaches, do they get offended? N
I just
not
lump Toronto, Mississauga, all of it's
I would
one to me.
I don't know if they are offended, it's not apparent to me outwardly, because I think that a lot of people are kind of polite about it. They'll be like, "Oh, I'm not gonna vote for you. Sorry," and then they, like, close their door, right? Once they hear the word conservative, they'll literally be nodding along, and then they'll hear conservative, they'll shut their door. But yeah, it's just a very liberal riding, and, it always has been. I knew it would be an uphill battle to run there, but the turnout is honestly quite interesting in my opinion. Um So the Liberal Party won in my riding in 2022, and they won again, right? It wasn't really surprising. That's pretty much what I expected. But what did surprise me is that the vote grew from 14,000 to win, right? They won with 14,000 in 2022, and then they won with 21,000 in 2025, right? So that's a 50% increase.
In a low voter turnout election too. So they clearly dumped resources into that riding. Was the PC close behind?
No, it was, the 2nd place was the NDP, and they were only ahead by the Conservatives by a few points, or, like, sorry, not points, a few hundred votes. It was, like, by 200 votes, the NDP beat out the Conservative Party. But what is interesting to note on that front is that the NDP was, like, a couple hundred behind the Liberal Party in 2022, but they went from, like, 14,000 just earlier in, like, you know what I mean, just slightly lower, to being like 9,000. So, and the Conservative Party went from 7,000 to 9. They actually had an increase. Every party lost votes in my riding besides the Conservative Party and the Liberal Party.
Yeah, that's an interesting dynamic for sure. So we're going to kind of get into the show a little bit here. I recently wrote an article called "The Steady Decline of Canada," and
Mhm,
in that I talked about the deindustrialization of Canada since 2000, and I discussed kind of all the monopolies in Canada and all the different things that are allowed to go on that make for less choice, more expensive goods. And this will kind of spin into the conversation on tariffs too, because we tariff a lot of items from the United States through our supply management, poultry, dairy, eggs, those kinds of things. And it's interesting to see the reactions from all the leaders. It seems like, and I'll get your take on this, but like the conservative, NDP, liberal response is like in kind of lockstep. There's not a lot of difference in the rhetoric and how they're approaching it. Uh, but I do agree with some of it in terms of diversifying trade is the one thing that keeps coming up. It's like, yeah, you shouldn't be so dependent on one trade partner that they can hold that much power in a perfect world. That if they decide to tariff some of your goods, you're talking about 500, 600,000 jobs in Ontario alone, as an
mhm,
example.
yeah. I mean, with the leadership responses, obviously Doug Ford is going like full crazy person. He's suggesting like acts of war. I looked it up. It is an act of war to shut off the power in a
It's
boring
debated by
country.
scholars from what I've seen. Like some people are, because Gaza came up and this has been a
Mm,
discussion there, so they were debating. It's some view it as active war, some view it as, oh, in some circumstances it might be okay, but also it's incredibly dumb. Like Line 5 runs from Michigan, I think, into Ontario. So they have control over the gas. It's like 50% of gas is coming from Line 5
mhm.
and it's 60% into Quebec. So it's like if you shut off the hydro, like do you not think the next logical response is like, well, if you want to shut off the power, we'll shut off the gas. It's kind of like they're just adding fuel to the fire rather than trying to make it work. It's not that I'm happy about like how Trump's
No, of course
handling
not.
this, and
Yeah.
I feel like he's definitely not trying to calm things down in Canada. He keeps poking the bear too. The 51st state stuff. It's getting old, in
He
my
it
my
I
opinion,
don't
but
I don't think he really cares about Canada, but then again, he's not the Canadian prime minister, right? Like he is serving his own country's interests, and I understand the things that he has said, and I don't agree with him doing it, but I do get it. I am in principle opposed to tariffs, which is why I'm also opposed to the Canadian government doing it, right? You were right to point out that there's kind of a homogenous attitude towards retaliatory tariffs between I suppose, like, the relevant parties federally, which is the NDP and the Liberals and the Conservatives. The only thing I would say there that's, like, kind of different from what you said is that, Polyev is definitely a lot better, as opposed to what I've heard Carney and especially Jagmeet Singh say.
Christian
Be
Freeland, we should
or
nuke up.
yeah, Freeland too, honestly, Bayless was kinda, like, better about it. He at least said he wanted to build the pipeline and diversify trade, and that's the main thing I'm saying about Polyev, right, is that even though it's unfortunate that he's saying and backing retaliatory tariffs on the same level as the Liberals and the NDP, I kind of get it, and I especially get it when they're kind of trying to draw comparisons between him and Donald Trump. If he started defending the idea of not using retaliatory tariffs, it would just give them more fuel to attack him with, so I kinda get it. But he is also saying the things that I do believe in regards to building the pipeline and diversifying trade, so given his situation and where he is, I kind of get it, but,
Before we get too far down here, let's pull in a video. This is Doug Ford uh, announces Ontario has ripped up its Starlink contract. So we'll pull that up. Let me know if you can hear this okay.
okay.
As part of this government-wide procurement ban, we're going one step further.
Can we hear that?
Yeah, I can hear that, okay.
Perfect.
As part of this government-wide procurement ban, we're going one step further. We're ripping up Ontario's contract with Starlink. It's done. It's gone. We won't award contracts to people who enable and encourage economic attacks on our province and our country, alongside federal tariffs and the measures my fellow premiers are bringing forward. This Team Canada's opening response.
I just listened to this and I kind of like, oh, you're really showing him by shooting yourself in the foot. Like, oh, look, hey guys, I'm gonna get you back. And then it's like pulling out a gun, shooting yourself in the foot. In this case, you're really harming Ontarians. It's rural Ontarians that were gonna benefit from this. But you really showed the Americans, Doug. Good job.
He's a redneck, dude. Like, I don't know how to else to put it. Like, this is clearly just a targeted, like the Starlink thing specifically is clearly targeted because they just don't like Elon because he associates with scary orange bad man. But it's like, what does this do particularly to pressure Donald Trump to lift his tariffs? That is the point behind what they're doing here, right? That's the point of the response, is to get him to stop.
Allegedly.
Allegedly, and it's just like, this is so, I don't know, this feels like social media policy almost. This seems like something someone on TikTok would come up with. Let's just ban Starlink and ignore any useful utility that it has to rural Ontarians. Oh, and best of all, let's offer absolutely no alternative. Let's offer no alternative for these people. It's like, I just don't get it. I really don't.
Well,
I don't.
unfortunately, it plays well to a certain crowd within the social media circles. It's like
I'm sure it does. I mean,
what's so
or
ingrained in our society, right? Like, oh, you got to stand up to a bully. In Canada, it's like back to World War II, right? We punch above our weight and we hold our own and we're tough and like relax. Like, be the smart guy in the room. That should be what you aspire to be. But putting retaliatory tariffs on Canadians pay those. Like it's
yeah,
us paying
absolutely.
taxes on American goods importing. So I can understand, like, not that I agree with it, but I can understand export taxes on certain goods, like
Mhm.
potash. That would be a you want to talk about something that would actually hurt the Americans in retaliation. It would be like a potash export tax, because I think it's over 80% of American potash, which is what you need to make fertilizers, comes from us. And so like
Mhm.
that would make sense. But this kind of stuff, I don't know where their heads at with all these retaliatory tariffs. It's like somebody in the back room, the lobbyist told them this is what they need to do, and they don't know any better, clearly. And so
I
they're
don't
running with it.
I just don't think it I don't think they're thinking utility at all. I don't think they're thinking cause effect. I think, and this is true of really all Ontario and federal, provincial, like provincial, federal, in Ontario, in Canada. That's what I know. I live in Ontario. This is what has defined all governmental policy. Is it's not about cause and effect. It's not about if it makes sense. It's really just about optics. As long as you're sticking it to the bad man, it doesn't really matter if it's smart or in the best interest of Canadians. To them, as long as it's not in Trump's interest, it doesn't really matter to them if it's in the best interests of Canadians at all. It's all optics. It really is.
Yeah, you would hope the people that are supposed to be leading the country actually care about the country, but no, I think there is an element of truth to that where they care about the optics of it and if it can keep them in power. So I want to go to this. Do you know who Thomas Sowell is? I assume you probably do. You seem like the type of
I
person who
actually
would.
don't. I'm sorry.
Oh
I don't
dear
know who he
God.
is.
Well, now you get to learn Thomas Sowell. Sowell?
Soul?
He's
Is it like SOU?
Sowell. Is
No.
he's a Harvard educated economist.
I
He
do
was
know that name,
he's a
but
former socialist. He actually started out his career as a socialist. Then he went to a socialist country and went, "Wow, this is stupid. This is not at all what I thought it was." And
Mhm,
now he's become one of the most prestigious voices among conservative Republican circles
mhm,
for common sense conservatism, common sense economic politics. He wrote a bunch of books. Economic Facts and Fallacies is a good one. Uh, I've read a number of his, but anyway, I can't recommend him enough. But we could spend a lot of time talking about it. But here's him talking about the trade imbalance, and I brought it up because I instantly, when I heard this video,
Mhm.
Uh, it reminded me of Trump, right? He's continually brought up the idea of trade imbalances, and in this video, he directly addresses that. So we'll pull that up.
Question. How much should people really worry about the balance of trade?
Somewhat less than you worry about being struck by lightning.
Okay, here's a statistic I heard just the other day. Here's how many cars Korea sells in the United States every year. 500,000. Here's how many cars we sell in Korea every year. 5,000. Why shouldn't we be worried about that imbalance?
I'm not sure why we should. Obviously, if the Americans were Americans forced at gunpoint to buy these cars from Korea?
Clearly not. No. So no.
I don't see why third parties should concern themselves about it.
Okay, you've done it again. You've batted away the question so easily that it leaves me wondering what the argument is on the other side. Why do some people worry about the trade balance then?
Oh, because the argument they're making is that this is sending American jobs abroad. Now, unfortunately, this argument was made some years ago in 1930. 1,000 economists took out full-page ads across the country saying, do not put up international trade restrictions. It will not increase employment. It will just set off a new round of retaliation. It was one of those wonderful things in media, like it was a bipartisan effort. The Democratic Congress wanted to pass the Smoot-Hawley tariffs, and the Republican president signed it into law. And it was one of the biggest disasters in the history of the country.
Okay, so that's a.
I do actually recognize him. I've seen him in my classes.
So see, I'm like, man, there's no way you don't know who that is. But the parallels he draws there is unreal because it's like he's talking about today. Exactly. Trump's talked about trade imbalances and how it affects, like no one's forcing you to buy these products. And then at the same time, he brings up the Halt Smoley, I think Halt Smiley. I don't know. I always mess it up. But the tariffs there and the result of that, and I think it's funny every time because it's from Ferris Bueller. I'm gonna pull this up.
This is a great movie.
In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the anyone, Great Depression, passed the anyone, a tariff bill, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which anyone raised or lowered raised tariffs in an effort to collect more revenue for the federal government. Did it work? Anyone know the effects? It did not work, and the United States sank deeper into the Great Depression.
So, all that to say, did it work? Did it work? No, it did not. And the United States sunk deeper into the Depression. So, all this back to the tariff talk. Why are we responding with retaliatory tariffs? When this is something that hurts the United States, it's gonna, I think if I'm giving the benefit of the doubt to our leaders, I think the idea is they're gonna put tariffs on us. If we put retaliatory tariffs, they're disincentivizing the movement of Canadian businesses to America. Here's the issue: we're a 40 million people market. They're a 300 plus million people market, so there's always going to be more incentive
Exactly.
to go to that market. So it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with they think that if they impose these retaliatory tariffs, that he'll lift them. They think that they'll make him lift them. I think because there's no other way I can rationalize this. How can a group of people who suddenly understand why tariffs are bad are so keen to implement them? It's not like these people understand tax incidence, right? Like they understand that tariffs get passed to the consumers though, although they don't understand that with things like taxing the rich or income tax. They never get it with those things. But as long as as long as it fits the narrative, then we get it. Regardless, the reason why they want to impose them so badly, despite acknowledging how bad they are economically, is that they think it will make him stop. And I don't know about what you think particularly, but what I heard about Trump's reaction to the concept of retaliatory tariffs is he just kind of shrugged it off and said, "Oh, well, maybe I'll raise it to 35%." Right?
He
It's like,
he kind of doubled down. He's like, "Oh,
like
whatever you do, I'll double it," basically.
no,
But
and that's just the kind of guy he is, right? Like I personally think that the real way to go about this is to kind of ignore him. Like I've been focusing on Donald Trump since he became the president when I was in the like 6th grade. I've been watching him and like him or hate him, he is a bit of a man of ego and he thrives off positive and negative attention. And it's like, why would you give him it? I just don't get it. Why don't you focus on, you know, protecting the border, one, because that's what he wants, and two, because that's in our national interest anyway. But then also, why don't you just build the pipeline, diversify trade, start trying to make the tariff itself less significant? Why would you impose tariffs? That will double the inflation. It won't
well,
fix the inflation, that's for sure. And it won't protect Canadian industry, as you're saying, because the US market is larger. It makes no sense. But like once again, these people have no critical thinking skills. They don't think about cause and effect. They just think about optics.
so I'm gonna pull this up. Like again, just all sides things. Benefit of the doubt. This was just today. Again, they put their own spin on this. With the market tanking, Trump's Commerce Secretary down says Trump may roll back tariffs as soon as tomorrow. So I'm not going to share it with that context.
Mexicans and the Canadians were on the phone with me all day today, trying to show that they'll do better. And the president's listening because he's very, very fair and very reasonable. So I think he's going to work something out with them. It's not going to be a pause, none of that pause stuff. But I think he's going to figure out, you do more and I'll meet you in the middle some way. And we're going to probably be announcing that tomorrow. So somewhere in the middle will likely be the outcome. The president moving with the Canadians and Mexicans, but not all the way.
So this is, obviously Canadian that love the response so far by our government have jumped on this and said, well, look at that. Trump's already backing down. I'm not sure that's what's going on here. But it's very possible that Trump's just using this as a way to gain concession. We have the USMCA coming up for renegotiation in 2026. And I think this is a leverage tool to put it in Canadians' heads and in Mexico, the same case, to put it in the head of the populace there that things can become very uncomfortable very quickly if you don't play ball with Trump. And I think this is going to be kind of a leverage point as they go into the negotiations with the trade agreement again. But I don't know how I feel about all this. My thing, if I was premier or if I was prime minister, I don't think, again, I wouldn't be gaslighting Donald Trump, who I believe has a very large ego. I wouldn't be saying anything bad about the guy publicly at all. I would be going out of my way to say only nice things.
That's closed doors at best.
Exactly. And then I would I'd probably scrap the supply management stuff. I'd take all the tariffs that we're tariffing them on, because it makes, like, the supply management program makes us pay more anyways. If we have American goods coming into Canada, as an example, on poultry, eggs, cheese, great. That's more options for me. That means probably lower prices, more market competition. That's better for the consumer. That's how I look at it. And then you take all those tariffs off the table, you play nice, and if at that point where if this game still is going on, you continue to diversify your trade, and just hopefully after 4 years you haven't severed the relationship with the United States, and you hope cooler heads come in and prevail. But I think this is a legacy issue for Trump. I think he's determined, and I mentioned this earlier today, to drive manufacturing back home, and this is one of the tools he sees as a way to do that. I worry, though, that as he's doing this, part of his legacy might be that he alienates America's allies and causes them long-term to diversify their trade. And it's like throwing, like when boyfriend, kind of pushes the ex-lover back into the abusive arms of someone else. He's pushing really hard. Well, where else do you have left to go? The big markets, India, China, Russia. I don't want to see us do more trade with them. I'd much rather do lots of trade with the United States. I think they're more in line with our values, but I do worry that that's if he pushes too hard the way he has been, and the poking and the prodding on the 51st state stuff obviously doesn't play well. I worry that that alienates America long term, and you're starting to watch NATO allies with the Ukraine stuff. I think you're starting to see the backroom dealings, maybe where they're kind of playing ball and figuring out how they're going to navigate America under Trump. And maybe long term, that means less trade with the United States, and that's not something I think Trump wants his legacy to be.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I think he really is going to be a legacy president, or like he's going for that, right? Like he did almost die running, and he's at the end of a very long life. Like he's in his, I believe, his late 70s now, and a lot of the things he's doing just seem to be like very, very popular with people. He just seems to be doing what he thinks people want, and that's great. And I have my own feelings about this and that, but I think the number one thing is, yeah, the tariffs are not gonna do him any favors in the long run. I know how he's thinking. He thinks he'll get, like, the companies back, and that's maybe true, but even if he does get them all back, if the tariffs are around long enough, the companies really do just say to themselves, like, "Oh my god, like, screw it, like, we're gonna just move all the way there," right? He will still have the issue of, like, not really having trade partners, and, or if he does, it won't be in the capacity that he wants, and it could, in the long run, eventually, like, yeah, it could weaken the United States quite a lot. It could probably be a significant enough factor to push China over the edge as the largest GDP country, even after a long enough period of time. But even then, it's also really hard to say, if that would sustain after his presidency is over. Maybe he does bring in all these companies, and maybe that's good for their economy and it alienates people, but then, maybe I don't know if Vance will be the next president. I don't know if he'll be a Democrat, like, I don't know, maybe Gavin Newsom or something, but eventually someone else will be the president, right? And, I don't think that those trade relationships would inherently be irreparably damaged, especially in a country like Canada, right? Like, we do border them, like, directly, and it would always be a very convenient trading ally, and obviously Canadians want that trading partner. Otherwise, we wouldn't have 77% of our exports be the US.
Yeah, I don't think anybody stops trading or it severs those relationships in any way, but I do think I'm going to play a clip of of Reagan talking about tariffing allies and
Mhm.
his view of it, because it's just I worry about, again, like, it's 77% today, but maybe you're setting the attitude among different allies that maybe we lower that. So if you win and you get some companies back, what are you losing at the same time? But the issue is we are much more reliant on the United States than they are of
Yeah.
us. But still, the
Yep.
best thing Canada can do is make a more
It
competitive business
is
environment here.
Yeah, I mean, I think regardless of whether these, sustain over time or not, it's in our best interest to diversify our trade regardless, and whether that damages Trump's legacy or not, it couldn't. Personally, in the long run, I don't think it's what he'll be remembered for. I think far enough out, the only thing he'll really be remembered for is being the first, like, purely celebrity president, private citizen to I think that really will be the main thing. And
Well, Reagan was
I
kind of
think
that.
yeah, but he was governor first, and he had World War II military experience, so it's a little bit more like he was a celebrity with a normal ascension to power, whereas Trump had, like, this bizarre just overnight, right? And it's just a completely different kind of thing. I think that's what he'll be remembered for above all else.
Yeah,
And
he
the
went.
tariffs will be significant for a while or the foreseeable future. Who knows? You can't really know for sure, but I ultimately don't think that the minutia of his policy will be what he's remembered for. I mean, if you ask a lot of people what it is Trump did, like 2017 to 2020, a lot of people couldn't tell you. A lot of people couldn't tell you. Probably more than half of people could not tell you. I think it will probably just be his status as a figure and more or less. But then once again, if his legacy is tarnished through doing this, as a Canadian, that's ultimately not my concern, regardless of what I think of him, right? Regardless of if the tariffs stick around or not, it's still in the best interest of Canada as a country to diversify its trade relationships anyway, because 77% with any country is a ridiculous figure. They own you at that point, practically.
Yeah, it's never a bad idea to diversify the trade. It's funny to me the reaction of Canadian politicians because it's like, what I kind of think about? It's like nobody's gonna beat beat these people but me. It's like kind of the Ontario and Canada approach is no one's gonna beat these people down except us. Carbon taxes, PST, HST. Like everywhere you go, there's another tax, airfare tax. I'll give you another example. Hidden tax no one talks about. I had a package stopped from the United States. It was protein powder. So I bought a couple months supply of this protein powder. Really good stuff. Jocko Willnick, if you know who that is.
I don't know, but I
He's
do use protein powder.
Former Navy SEAL. So we get this stuff. It gets stopped at the border for search and seizure by Canadian Customs. They call me and say, well, we've stopped it. There's going to be a small release fee, they said. I was like, well, what is that? Like 5-10% of the total? Yeah, something like that. So they send it out. And had I known how much it was going to cost, I would have sent it back.
It was probably like
$173 in import fees because Canadian Customs stopped it because they thought it was a suspicious package. And then in the process of them stopping it, they cut open the top of the box and cut open one of the bags of protein powder and then just put it back like nothing happened. Anyways, everywhere you look in the Canadian society, there's some form of tax. Like, and I'll give you another example. You're young yet. You haven't maybe worked a lot of hours in a job yet. But for instance, I know for me, there was a time on a paycheck I had $1,000 worth of overtime. Gross. What I took home on that $1,000 was $400 extra dollars. So $420, $430. So the government stepped in, took about 54%. So imagine I got 5 kids. You're spending time away from your kids. You're getting up, in this case, getting up at about 3:30 in the morning to get out the door so that I could get to work on time, get through the security gate, go do my overtime for 5 a.m. And my reward for that was the government came in and said, thanks, that's awesome. We're going to take 60% roughly of what you just did. So this is kind of the background of all these tariffs and things going on. They're not making a competitive business environment. They don't reward hard work here in Canada. And when you do try to get ahead, they kick you. They kick you hard and they kick you while you're down. But anyways, I'm going to pull up Reagan here and we'll see what he has to say on tariffs and allies. Hopefully this comes through okay.
Are not our enemies. They are our allies. We should beware of the demagogues who are ready to declare a trade war against our friends, weakening our economy, our national security, and the entire free world, all while cynically waving the American flag. The expansion of the international economy is not a foreign invasion. It is an American triumph, one we worked hard to achieve, and something central to our vision of a peaceful and prosperous world of freedom. After the Second World War, America led the way to dismantle trade barriers and create a world trading system that set the stage for decades of unparalleled economic growth. Yes, back in 1776, our founding fathers believed that free trade was worth fighting for, and we can celebrate their victory, because today, trade is at the core of the alliance that secure the peace and guarantee our freedom. It is the source of our prosperity and the path to an even brighter future for America.
So very different view and approach to free trade. And also, like, we're roughly 40% less than the American dollar. For example, if America takes in all auto manufacturing and just guts us of our auto manufacturing, now all those parts are going to cost presumably roughly, maybe we have extra fees and EI and different things that employers have to pay into, but like let's say low end 20-30%.
Right. Yeah.
So that's kind of the benefits of free trade, and that's not really thought about, I guess, in this equation But Reagan definitely had a different opinion, and he kind of approached it from trade is the thing that kind of glued the world together after the World War into peace and prosperity. Because if I rely on you and you rely on me, we have a vested interest in maintaining a peaceful world and order.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I'm not sure where you want to go from here, but if you want to talk about a little bit about, are you planning on running in the next election? Are you
I
not
am
that far out?
actually, yeah. I actually do want to. I don't know what I'm gonna do with this riding though. It's a really rough one. Like 1 out of 5 people are just so clearly not interested. Um, but I do wanna keep running because I think I would be an I think I am an effective candidate on the ground because, I mean we did lose some votes compared to 2022, and that includes my riding.
They had a lot of protest votes in 2022. A
Yeah.
lot of the
Mhm.
irony of that for me is like all these people will never forget, and we're gonna keep fighting for change. And then
Yeah,
it's like, yeah,
those are always the people who drop off first. It's, always the people who drop off first. It's
what do you mean? The
yeah,
loud ones in the room are the ones that go away quietly?
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we still did pretty good, for the election given the ridings we filled. I did the math on it, and we did do a little bit lower than we in theory should have, right? I mean, if we're filling 128, or sorry, if if we filled
124, yeah.
108 and we filled 123 last time because apparently someone got disqualified, and the vote count was in 2022 127,000, and this time it was like 80,000. We
Yeah.
theoretically should have gotten about 110, right? But it's like you say, the first election occurred during COVID, and also it was a new party, and also it's only really a 1 point difference provincial total, right? Which is like, if you look at the Green Party, they flip flop 1%, 2%, 3% all the time, right? I don't think it's a cause for concern, and I don't think it's indicative of anything at all. But I would really just want to know, both who voted for us so I can talk to them and I can, try to get them to help me volunteer for me and help me canvass because obviously like even the Green Party, who only got 1,000 more votes than me, by the way, in a hyper liberal riding, they still only got 100 or 1,000 more votes than me when they have like a team, presumably. Um, it's only 1,000 more votes. It's like I would want to talk to the people who voted for us. I'd want to see if you can volunteer for us. I'd wanna talk to the people who voted for the Ontario party, even though it's only 125 people in my riding, I would still wanna talk to them, because if the Ontario party didn't exist, presumably I would have gotten 1%, right? Which is it is significant in my opinion, especially since most of these people do probably vote for them in good faith and they're just being tricked. And I would also wanna know who voted for the Conservative Party because that's, like, a pretty easy block of people to convert compared to the NDPs and the Liberals. I look, I'm not saying that every Liberal is impossible to convert, but I don't
I
know. In
I
my
think,
riding, it's just a different type of animal.
yeah,
It's
Toronto's a different spot for sure. I think the big thing takeaway on this last election is by far you set apart from the competition, fifth biggest party in Ontario, already established, cemented, wasn't
Mhm.
even close between fifth and sixth.
No.
And
Who
I
did
think
get 6th? Was it the Ontario
I
party?
think it was the Ontario party. I think they had
And they
20,000
filled
ish votes
yeah, it's
across
because they
the.
filled 40 ridings or something,
Well,
like
and most of the
44.
votes you could get was like two or three candidates. It was like Sloan got a bunch. Rick Nichols got. I guess he did run. I think I've seen his name.
He
I
did?
I have to go back and look at because the one I was looking at was so wonky. Like uh, it wasn't showing the names in the right places and different things. But I think
Mhm.
I seen his name or I seen a Nichols for the Ontario
Yeah.
party, and it was like 8,000 votes. So I mean,
Okay.
there's like
Okay.
half the vote count almost of the entire party. And then Sloan would have been probably,
Yeah, I
between those,
mean,
that's 2/3 of your entire vote share. So
there's always a little bit of prestige around like central party figures like that. Yeah. So that's
no,
that's not too surprising, right?
Sloan had the advantage of being able to run as a conservative candidate, and he piggybacked on all of New Blue leader Jim Carhallo's all the policies put out, and then kind of just yeah, whatever he said, like that one.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Jim kind of characterized Derek Sloan as this sort of rabid fanboy figure who is obsessed with him and is dedicated to his fall by just copying precisely what he says and then splitting the vote, right?
Well, we covered it. Like, I mean, it's not even worth spending the oxygen on. Honestly, it's just getting frustrating at this point
It's
because people are
not.
under the illusion that they're a real choice. It's like, listen, the party, they didn't do anything. They were deregistered. Couldn't even put in their proper paperwork after the last election. Got deregistered,
Mhm.
and then they pop up 2 years later after doing nothing and go, "Hey, election! You should give us money and vote for us."
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
like,
I
okay.
feel like the only people who would vote for the Ontario Party would be people who are unaware of the New Blue Party. Like,
Yeah,
I don't
so I
I
think
don't
some
know.
loyalists, right? Just the
What
name recognition of
it's
Sloan and
just oh, that's what it would be. Because in my mind, I'm like, what would someone say to themselves to be like, "Oh, yeah, I'll vote for the Ontario Party over the New Blue Party." Because in my mind, any rational person would be like, "These 2 parties on paper represent the same thing, but this one is far larger and actually has a chance of winning a few seats."
yeah,
So the
it's not
so
even
I don't
close in terms of candidate count and things like that. But it's just name recognition, I think. There's the illusion because there's all these backroom like whisper campaigns. Um, Jim, he didn't support the Freedom Convoy movement. It's like he was
oh,
the guy who
whatever.
gave the stage and the mic to people that were going up and talking at the convoy. So give a rest.
It's all bullshit.
They wouldn't let him into Liberty Coalition or whatever. And I heard Hillier recently bring that up as I think it was an interview with Candace Malcolm of True North. He
Mhm.
brought up like, what are the differences between you and New Blue? And that was one of the things he mentioned is we were very vocal early on the freedom side of things, and we started the end of lockdown caucus. It's like you guys
Is that
wouldn't let
really
him in.
is that really relevant now, though? It's
Yeah.
kinda not
Well,
anymore. Is it still relevant?
you know
Not
what is
really.
you know what is relevant is not showing up to the legislator to represent your constituents and pretending that you're somehow that's you fighting for freedom when you the flip side of that is Belinda Carr-Halios, her husband going through cancer treatments. Obviously,
Mhm,
Jim, leader of New Blues, well now, but he was going through cancer treatments. She
mhm.
would drop him off, or whatever the arrangement was, and then she's going to the legislator, speaking on behalf of her constituents, and then going to grab her husband from cancer treatments. Like that's a wild,
That's a crazy reality.
and that's the type of people they are, and they didn't stop. And I just recently I got a video that will be coming out talking about I think it's Bill C-67. It's the racial identity thing that the NDP tried to put through. It got passed in the second reading.
What
Yeah,
does that wanna
racial
do?
equity in the education
Exactly.
system.
Racial equity.
Yeah, no, that's the key, right?
Mhm. Mm, yeah.
It's
Well,
not
'cause it
it's not your
yeah.
Martin Luther King racial
Well
perspective where we all
well,
should judge by
yeah,
content of
a
character.
equality of rights and equality of outcome is not the same thing. Yeah,
Well, very much so.
definitely, yeah.
So the only person, I found that Sam Osterhoff, the assistant minister of education at the time, very supportive of the legislation, very supportive of the member who brought it forward, and I call it the new racism bill because it's like they like to do the wordplay. Oh, it's the anti-racism bill. No, 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 it's racism. It's the racism bill. It's you should no you should judge people by this color of their skin, not the content of their character. It's the reverse of everything but they put anti-racism there, and people go, "I'm not racist, and I want people to be treated fair and
Well,
equally."
it's
That's
not
not what that
racist if
does.
it's for equality. That's
You
that's
can't
pretty
be
much
racist to white people because they have privilege. It's
no, these
critical race
people
theory.
These people are like white liberal racists. They're like the people in the movie Get Out, if you've ever seen that movie, where they're like obsessed with black people because they think they're super talented musicians and incredible athletes and or what have you, right? Like just complete ridiculous nonsense. That's what the NDP kind of reminds me of, is just like this obsession. Like if you're obsessing over groups this much, there must be something kind of wrong with you. I don't know. I
Well, the
don't think
idea,
about groups like this. Like I think about people and
yeah, I try to just judge people based on who they show themselves to be and how they act. I
mhm.
try to leave that behind, but apparently I might be suffering from what they call subconscious racism that I don't even know I possess, but apparently maybe it's there underneath, and I need to address and decenter my whiteness and address my subconscious racism. Like that's in the bill. Belinda Carvalho's voted against it. But Sam Osterhoff, Assistant Minister of Education for Doug Ford's Progressive Conservatives, very supportive. Very supportive. Says literally in the bill, racism means the use of socially constructed ideas of race to justify or support, whether consciously or subconsciously, the notion that one race is superior to another. You just don't know that you're racist yet, Thomas. We'll teach you. It's okay.
I just don't know that I'm racist.
It's a subconscious thing. You didn't even know. We'll teach you. It's okay.
I mean, that's why the PCs are backing it. There's no question about it. They've, to my knowledge, voted alongside every social policy the NDP has put forward because they don't want to deal with the negative press that comes with fighting against it. They don't want to be divisive. They don't want to
Speak truth.
like no, they don't. They want to keep their like massive majority over the province and just, ride it into the sunset. It's like I don't know how accurate this is or if it's taken out of context, but I did see an article that had a headline where it's like Premier Doug Ford saying he wants to be the premier forever, right? It's like I could see him saying that. I don't
Seems like
know.
the Babylon Bee, but like plausible. No,
It
that's why I
does.
call him DEI Doug. He's DEI Doug. It's pretty bad when the liberals almost seem reasonable on certain issues
Oh
because
yeah. I
DEI Doug
pref-
pushes all the same sex ed
I
curriculum.
I preferred Bonnie Crombie to Doug Ford, and I have no problem saying that. If it's just 3 progressive parties anyway, I have no problem saying that one of the progressive leaders was less bad than the other. He's not conservative in any way at this point. She's the one who was telling him to cut down on spending, and
That's wild, eh?
it's not that her ideas were good. They were also bad, but the fact that she's, like, saying the right criticisms even is shocking to
It's
me.
like bizarro world. Everything's backwards. Well, yeah, because he spent more than Kathleen Wynne per person or per capita.
Yep,
And it was the
yeah,
Fraser Institute that put
per
that out.
capita minus relief spending and minus inflation as
Just
well.
Doug
Yeah,
knows how to spend the money better. Okay, you just got to
sure,
trust the process.
sure.
He puts the P in progressive, progressing us in a downward spiral. It's good. She just trust the
Mm.
process. No, it's funny. Like he has it. He's very good at the rhetoric because
Yeah,
his brother
I'll give
was
him that.
a
Yeah, I'll
very
give
good
him that.
conservative, right? So I think he probably picked up a thing or two from Rob, where he knows how to talk about these things. But clearly, he doesn't. He doesn't vibe check with him. Give like a terrible analogy. No, he's very much liberal, and it's just he knows how to talk to conservatives when it's time to get their votes and their money. So
Well, it's also that he just kinda owns the conservative vote based off branding alone. It's not like any conservative would say to themselves, "Oh, I'm gonna vote for the Liberals or the NDP," because they believe that the Liberals and the NDP are worse, right? So it's like,
yeah,
it doesn't matter if everything he's doing is terrible, like, excessive spending, no tax cuts, whatever it is, right? It doesn't matter to people as long as they continue to believe it would be less bad.
and it's completely contrived and in their own mind. I had this conversation with my dad. Love him, but
Mhm.
also you're talking about he goes, no, fundamentally there's a difference between the conservatives and liberals. I don't agree with everything the conservatives do. That being said, they're fundamentally different. They're more fiscally responsible. I was like, Dad, he spent more money than Kathleen Wynne, and she got kicked so hard out of office they lost party status after the last election because she was so terrible financially for the province. Like That should be enough, but it's because, you put blue in the color,
Yeah,
you put
exactly.
conservative in the name, and you got a 100-year brand you can run on, and there's a lot of people that, until they see somebody that can win. And that really starts with, and this is a call to action. If you're listening to this, don't wait for the next election to get involved on the ground with somebody like Thomas, with the new blue. Get involved now. Because what you really need to win is you need to have 20, 40, 50, 100 people on the ground every day knocking doors when it comes time for an election, building that base, that EDA base, getting donations up in between elections so that there's a war chest there. But like you need to have a large volunteer base. Like people think they're powerless, and it's they've been fed a lie. Get out, get involved, take 3 hours a week when it comes to an election. And if you multiply that by 20, 30 people in a riding, you'd be shocked at the
It makes
results.
a
How many
it
people
makes a
don't even know?
world of difference. It makes a world of difference, and I mean, if that doesn't happen, if people don't get involved, if people don't spread the message and help the party grow, then you end up like the Green Party, where it's like you'll sit comfortably around 2 to 3% forever because the candidate just kinda doesn't do that much between elections. It's a huge thing because it's not even just knocking every door once and hoping that enough people will agree with you to hop on board. You need to
Yeah,
knock the same door 2, 3, 4, 5 times,
yeah, it's
then they'll
multiple
get it.
multiple points of introduction with the party, and a lot of people are unaware. They're unaware
Yeah,
of New Blue. They're unaware that there is a real conservative alternative, and that
that's a
takes
huge
work.
thing. Yeah, I mean, damn, I mean, I think, like, 4 out of 5 doors I knocked out, like, one of the first questions I would ask people, obviously, is, like, "Are you aware of the New Blue Party?" And, yeah, like, 80% of people would say, "No. No, I am not aware of the New Blue Party. What's their thing? How are they different from the conservatives?" They could pick up that it's not left wing, and that's about it. And
Yeah,
they're
well,
maybe
New
like,
Blue is good branding, right?
yeah, or they'll be like, "Oh, well, I've heard of it, but I don't know anything about it," which is also significant because you want people to not only be aware of the brand, but understand it fully, even if they don't agree with it. You can't ever force people to agree with you. That's fine. It's just you want everyone to be informed and know, and that's really my goal for by the time the next election rolls around. Like I completely intend over the next couple of years to continue knocking doors and keep spreading the message and build the support over time. It's like I got the votes that I got and I did it in like 3, 4 weeks, right? And it's like in my mind, I'm like, well, if I give it 4 years, I would have a lot more, right? And I think that's true for every single candidate in the new blue party, and I hope that they all have that same kind of attitude. I hope they're not just gonna like bum around for the next 4 years and wait for when it's relevant to them again because I don't know, they'd be a lot happier with the result if they just put in the work now and kept to it, right? I don't know.
You're always going to have some people that are going to do that, but I think I met a lot of really good candidates,
Yeah,
dedicated candidates,
absolutely. Yeah, me
and I
too.
think there is this, you know, uh, gut check where they're like, okay, what do, and this is the thing is like real leadership. It's like, okay, here's the results. How do we improve? What do I need to do? It's not looking to blame somebody. It's what do I need to
No.
do? And I seen a lot of that from a lot of candidates, and it was good to see. And it's kind of it stems from you need to have a good ground game, and you need to get more volunteers on the ground. And that's my question for you to close this out. Uh, you're in university.
Yeah.
What is it like in university when you like? Do people know that you ran? And what are the kind of is there an opportunity there in university for a party like New Blue?
Is there an opportunity in the university? I've certainly talked to certain people who like the new blue. Some of them even said, "Oh, I would have ran for them if I knew about it earlier." I would, or I don't know. Some people said I won't vote for them because I need to vote for Ford, and I'm like, no, Ford's gonna win by a landslide anyway. Vote for the new blue, and they'd be like, yeah, you're right. When they looked at the platform and they thought about it, but yeah, obviously, most university students are not conservative. Period. They don't even like the PC party, and I had a conversation with this one guy. And I'm like, "Yo, I'm running. Isn't that, like, cool?" And he's like, "What party are you running for?" And I said, "The New Blue Party." He's like, "Isn't that, like, a far right, populist, racist, like, AFD style party?" I'm like, "No, not at all. It's pretty moderate when you actually look at it." He's like, "Ah, I don't know about that." And I showed it to him, and he's like, "Oh." He's, like, tapping the phone. He's like, "Where's" it's like he's, like,
Find
looking
it.
he's looking for the racist part.
Any alternative must be racist. I've been programmed to know this. Yeah.
Yeah, but
No,
I don't know. There are people, and it's totally worth reaching out to university age students because obviously there are people like me. I'm not one of a kind, obviously, even though
you're
most
not a
universities.
unicorn?
I am not a unicorn, even though it is predominantly, I would say, like NDP primarily, but also liberal people. And the liberals are only liberal because they think the NDP can't win, kind of people.
Do you
And
think there's an opportunity to make like a new blue university group or college group and start pushing it on campuses? I guess that's where I was driving.
It's absolutely possible. You would just have to get together like 15 people who are, conservatively minded, who are like motivated and want to get into extracurriculars, and it would absolutely be doable, and it would absolutely gain support in Toronto, which is a big thing because I don't know specifically what ridings we didn't fill off the top of my head, but I'm certain that many of them were in Toronto. And, like a university group like that, especially across all three of the major universities like York, Ryerson, and U of T would be huge. And it could get people involved, if not as candidates, then as volunteers. And I mean, like I said, obviously most young people, most university people are not right wing, but it's not nobody. And every person counts, especially if they're motivated and they're inspired to do what they think is right. You can get a lot of great people that way, so it's absolutely worth pursuing.
Especially when a lot of young people like yourself, and it was not nearly as bad where I was when I was your age and in school. A lot of people feel like they don't have a voice if you're a conservative. So if you create that place where they can, hey, I'm not alone. There is other people that think like me that are my age that have the same ideas about what's going on. I think that's
You
powerful in of itself. And
you'd have a bit of a snowball there too. I've
yeah,
literally had full conversations with people where they're like, "Oh, I wanna make this argument for this essay, but I can't do it because if I make this argument, the left-wing professor is going to, like, give me a 65."
yeah,
And
that's just
whether that is true or not, it's probably not true, but whether it is or it isn't, that's something I've heard people say a lot.
yeah, it's the
People
fear of
people
reproach.
self-censor big
Uh,
time.
It's a huge problem in Canada in general. The being afraid to actually speak what you believe because of fear of retribution or the consequences that may come with it as a result. And COVID kind of strengthened that too, right?
Big time, yeah.
Yeah.
But I
So
mean, some good came out of COVID. I mean, I c- I myself considered myself to be a left wing person before COVID.
well, you
It was
gotta you
a
gotta wake
yeah.
up to the power of the state, then, eh?
No, yeah, exactly. I mean, in my mind, when I was a kid, right? So I obviously didn't know anything on a theoretical or in practice level. It was just like in my mind, the liberals were just the cool people who like believe in human rights and let everybody do their own thing and like support people who need help. And it's
Yeah.
like that is just like such a dishonest representation. But that's what was sold to me in public school and by my family and by my friends and everybody else. And
Yeah,
it took my own personal research to realize otherwise.
you're heartless if you're a conservative. That's what's drilled into you, right?
Yep,
Oh, you don't
unempathetic.
care about
You
people,
just
right?
don't care about disabled people, you don't care about black people, you don't care about gay people, this or that, because you don't believe in the state sticking their nose into forcefully solving these issues. It's like, no,
You realize
no.
when you get on the other side of the aisle that most conservatives are like, I just want to be left alone, and
That's
I don't
really
want to
all
pay
it is.
crazy amount of taxes. And I think maybe the best way to help people is I'm not opposed to social programs, but we shouldn't reward people that abuse them. And at the same time, the more money we can take in an economy, the more money we have to be generous. That's
Yeah, that's
basically
the other thing
conservatives
is
in a
like
nutshell.
that's a big problem with a lot of the social programs is the way they're funded too. It's through super high taxation and then like printed money. It's like why don't you generate wealth?
I
Like
I I had this conversation with my wife because not to end on a strong note here, but like welfare. Like, I wonder how much the numbers would drop off if he said after like 3 or 6 months, because I think they did this in a Scandinavian country, whether it was Sweden or Finland. They basically said like we're cutting you off after 6 months. Like, if you haven't found a job in 6 months of being on welfare, you weren't really looking. And I know in the GTA, as an example, you have all these temp agencies, and I remember living in Ontario. It's like I could go to a temp agency and have a job the next day, the very
oh
next day.
yeah.
If you want to work, there's work. But
There is, it just might not be good. It probably
well,
won't be
but
good, but it's like that's besides the point. Yeah.
this is the thing though. If I could stay at home and be on welfare and maybe be able to make ends meet. If you can do that, why would you go to work? And people don't like to think like that, but it's human nature, right? We tend to, a lot of people will take the easy way out if you give them the easy way out. So I almost wonder if you cut it after like 6 months or you gradually decreased it, the amount they were allowed to receive over time, how quickly those numbers would drop off. But that would make me a bad person for saying that because I just don't care about people that are down on their luck.
It's like, no, I really hate that kind of framing of conservative policy. It's just it there's a very clear difference between not caring about an issue and
Mhm.
just not thinking it's the government's place to forcefully solve the issue, but then actually end up making it worse because they're incompetent.
The government pretty well sucks at most of what they do, if
Yeah,
not all of it.
that's why I consider myself a libertarian. It's like you said, I just want to be left alone as much as possible because every time they try to interject in XYZ issues, it gets worse. They spend more money on affordable housing, it gets worse. They spend
It's
money on addiction, like safe injection sites, thinking it'll make people less addicted, but then they half-ass it and they don't do what Portugal did. They just set it up and do nothing else. And then it's like, wow, amazing. The addiction issue got worse. What did you expect? It's every issue, they just throw money at it and give themselves a centralized power over solving the issue. And then it just gets worse because they misunderstand the issue. I don't trust any centralized body to meaningfully solve any issue anymore. I've watched them mess everything up my whole life. I'm just done with it, quite frankly.
You're too young to be this black pilled. You're 20 years old. You're I talking
Well,
like me
dude,
at
it's like,
30.
dude, it's like I want to buy a house one day.
Well,
I
you
want to buy a
can.
house.
You just
I
got to go
can.
really far north where there's no jobs and like you got to drive 5 hours or be flown in or flown out to your job.
Oh, that's great. I
And
can ride a dodo plane to work.
yeah, no, there's just opportunity here. I think you're missing the point. You'll never own a home in the greater Toronto area. Definitely not Toronto.
No.
If nothing drastic changes. But your opportunity is if you go like 20 hours north in a rural town with almost no employment, there's a house there for you. You just need to
There
figure out how to make it work.
there
Become a YouTuber.
definitely is, and it's doable. What I would say to that though is the attitude or the thoughts that have crossed my mind and the attitude that's more prevalent than I'll just move north is I'll just move south. Is the actual common
No,
answer. I'm
the
not
dark
joking.
side.
I'm not joking. Like a lot of well-educated people who are looking at working in decent industries are like, I'm just gonna move south. I'd make more money. My house would be
Mhm.
cheaper. I could raise a family easier, this and that. I could go on vacation twice a year, whatever. Right? You see that a lot with like medical students, for instance. You see it a
Then you're
lot
going to
with
see
like
talent exit Canada if they don't address these issues in a real and
they
meaningful way.
They really need to because yeah, most people don't say to themselves, "I can't afford a house, I'm gonna move to a rural town," because even though that's true, a lot of people don't wanna live in a rural town. they'd rather
Yeah.
live in a city, right? Especially if you're like me, if were born in Toronto, you've lived in Toronto your whole life. You don't want to like suddenly not live in Toronto or not live in a major metropolitan center because it's a very different kind of life living rural or
I'm very
suburban
rural for the record.
suburban or urban. No, I know, but and there's nothing wrong with that, and I like rural life too in brief pockets, but I am adapted to like living in the city, right? And it's like I don't think it's right that I'm being pushed out of my own
No,
city
I agree.
at all,
No,
right?
I'm just
So,
laughing because I live in a town of 300 people. We
well,
have
I'm sure
H.
that's great in a lot of ways. I'm sure you know a lot of people.
No, I don't. I'm
No.
introverted as is. I don't want to. I mostly don't like talking with people. It takes like I can do short bursts with people, but it's like it's taxing in a sense. As bad as that sounds. No, I'm not extroverted. I'm not the type of person that wants to know everyone. I have
Mhm.
my family. I'm happy to raise my kids. But no, 300 people. We have a Chinese restaurant. It's
Mhm.
outside of that we have a gas pump and two mechanics, ironically. But that's and everything closes at like 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock.
Like PM, yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, so like if you don't get home at like 4:30 and head to the store, you're not getting anything. And the closest grocery store is 10 minutes, but it's kind of like a rinky-dink grocery store with not much there. And then if you want to go get real groceries, it's a 30-minute drive each way. So
Yeah.
that's the lifestyle out here.
It's look, I got nothing against rural life, obviously.
I miss good food.
It's just not for me personally, and it's not for a lot of people who I go to school with.
I
And
can't blame you.
I don't know, I just wanted to make note of how concerning that is to me. Is that the very common attitude is I would just move south because even though there's no social safety net, even though there isn't this, even though there isn't that, at the end of the day, lower cost of living and being able to buy a home is a pretty hard thing to beat.
Yeah,
And the Canadian government's got to find some way to beat that. They got to make it happen here. They're going to lose a lot of talented people who would strengthen the economy. They'll lose a lot of people.
I shouldn't do this because I know I'm trying to wrap it up, but 40% of Canada's economy is on real estate. They take that out of the equation, right? They have a vested interest on forever going up. And at the same time, how do you address this issue when like if I go, hey, we're gonna fix this and we're gonna halt immigration except for economic immigration for like the next decade, and we're gonna build as many homes as possible, including in the green belt, right? Wherever we can put
Mhm.
them up, we're gonna put them up. And Karen, who bought her home for $60,000 in 1970, and it's worth like $800,000 now, you go to her and you go, and your house is going to drop by 60-70%. Isn't that great? She's going to go, no, that's terrible. I'm voting for whoever is not going to do that. And this is kind of the issue. They've created such a bubble that young
That's a
people
lot.
like myself, like I'm at the top end of the spectrum for young people, right? I'm 30.
Right, yeah.
But I'm still in the same boat as you, where I'm looking at things and I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to make this work.
No,
This is
yeah, I mean,
insanity.
yeah, it affects I mean, you're the same age as my older brother. It's like, yeah, he has to rent.
I'm
He'll never
renting a
buy a
house right
home,
now.
right?
Well,
Right.
yeah, my options are literally that probably to be in a northern community. And
Mhm.
fortunately for me, my one of my brothers is settled in a northern community. Another brother's looking at that community. So we're kind of probably all going to end up, unfortunately, up in the north and probably Ontario in the long term. But that's about all the options. You're either in a rural community in the prairie somewhere, or a rural
Yeah, I mean,
community in the East Coast, or you're north.
and I mean, there's nothing wrong with that besides the fact that you have no choice.
That's it.
That's the only problem there. There's nothing wrong with rural living. It's just that, like, you shouldn't be priced out of living in a city.
Yeah,
And it's like, yeah, this is what happens when you bring in, like, cities worth of new people and you build no new cities. We got, like, 5 major urban centers.
800,000 people in 1 year in Ontario. Doug Ford bragged about. You know why they did it though? It's because they have no concept on how to actually grow the economy. So if they just
No, as long as our
made
GDP is up, people won't realize we're in a
right,
recession. It's ridiculous.
if we just import 800,000 people this year, it will look like our GDP is going up. Well, technically that's true, but also, yeah, major decline in
Yeah, it's like, how about you look at the GDP per capita? It's like, then tell me
no,
what you think. Like,
no.
exactly. Yeah.
Let's not look at the no. Shh. Let's not look at the real problem. You just keep your eyes on what we tell you to look at, and that's a good place to end it. Thomas, where would people find you on social media?
Well, my Twitter is it's my last name Gregory, then THO, and then I think it's 22837, I believe.
We'll link it in the video description.
Um,
And
yeah, and
anything else you want to close out on?
no, I mean, not much. I had a great time talking to you.
I appreciate that.
Thanks a lot for having me on. I feel flattered, especially after you said that you don't really like talking to people that much.
Should have never said that one out loud. No, I said I'm introverted. Like I do short bursts. This is good.
Yeah, it's
Technically,
an hour, 10 minutes.
technically you're 2,800 kilometers away, so that's the perfect. That's the perfect distance. I'm just gonna shut the laptop and it's done. I can't. No, I'm not the type of person that's gonna go and be the life of the party. Like I do better one on one, and also I'm the type of person that just has to go away after a long day of talking with people and have alone time. That's how
I'm the same. I'm the same way. I totally get it. But yeah, just like one more thing is just like, yeah, with tariffs, just to summarize it in the quickest way I can is Donald Trump walked up and punched Canada in the face, and then they responded by shooting themselves in the foot. And then in regards to New Blue and the election, I have intentions of building support in the riding and trying to get as many people to volunteer for me and building the party from the ground up. I hope to see at least 5 times as many votes as I got this time. I would hope to see similar growth in other candidates. If you can get every person who voted for you to talk to 5 people and convince them, that's a big thing, right? And I think the party is going to go nowhere but up. We already have like half the support base the Green do, and how long have they been around? Like since the 1960s, right? Because they don't do anything between elections. So, um, if anyone from the New Blue Party is watching this, uh, please remain active. Please remain active in between the elections. Don't just like wait, and please also don't just disappear. More so, don't just disappear. But I feel proud about how the party did given the circumstances. Yes, we lost votes, but there's always a bit of a swing from election to election, and it was a snap election, and we couldn't fill every riding, and things were tough. But I feel really proud about the work that everybody did given the circumstances, and I am confident that the party will continue to grow.
Well, thanks for joining me, and I'm just going to close out here. So, everyone, that was Thomas Gregory, former candidate of the New Blue Party, plans on running in the next election. Well, thank you for joining us. Remember to like this video and subscribe, and check out divergemedia.ca for our written work, where we put lots of good information out, and we'll see you next time.